Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar on diet during your breast cancer journey. My name is Samantha, and I'm the GM of Breast Cancer Foundation. While there are many familiar names and faces, there are many here who are also new to our community. I'd like to take the opportunity to share a little bit about what we do here in Breast Cancer Foundation. Okay, so I'm just going to share my slides so that those who don't know what we do, we're going to just go through it very, very quickly and how we can support you in your journey. What do we do? Well, you can see here that we've got all these beautiful women that's there. We call them our warriors. And our mission is to ensure that we want to eradicate breast cancer as a life-threatening disease. And what we do is we always want to raise awareness about breast cancer through talks like these that advocate early detection through regular screening. And we also want to support our warriors, as we call them, and their families through many befriending and training activities. And we also want to ensure that the men are also play a very important role in encouraging and supporting the women in their journey. Now, just a couple of statistics. 1 in 13 women will develop breast cancer by the time they turn 75 in Singapore, and this number has tripled in the last 50 years. So this is actually something that is a societal issue that we have to be concerned about. But as long as we are able to advocate early detection, the survival rate is very high. We're talking 90%. So I think that it's really, really exciting that we all can play our important roles in this. What's really key here is, as you know, breast self-exam and mammogram screening is key to the survival and to the welfare of the families concerned. What's breast self-examination? Now, knowing about it, you have to do something about it. And this actually, all women should do it every month, okay? If you're menstruating at day 7 to 10, you should do that once a month. And for ladies who have stopped your menstruation, do it once a month at a specific day. And it only takes less than 10 minutes. What's really key here is that it only takes 10 minutes. You know about how your breast feels, if there are any lumps, retracted nipples, changes in color to the skin or the areola, or a discharge, or even the change in the size of your breast. I think this you really need to see the doctor straight away so that they can take the positive action. And we also have here our BSE guide. Now, if you can't remember the various steps, you can actually download this and it will actually describe to you how to do a breast self-exam and how to book a mammogram thereafter. There are links to this whole page. What's really key is this you can do every day at your home, once a month at your home. But if you do discover a lump or you're concerned, do go for your mammogram. We do have a full sponsorship program that's available for eligible women 50 years and above with CHAS card blue or orange at all polyclinics. Okay, so we do encourage women to go for their mammogram. This schedule is that for women 40 years to 49, we do encourage annual mammogram screening. For 50 years and above, every 2 years. Okay, but monthly breast self-exam once a month, please. We do have available these books that you can download, as these are all ebooks. And for those of you who know of younger women that's been diagnosed with breast cancer, we do have this, which is called Take Charge of Your Breast Health. And this is where young women less than the age of 44 share their journey. And you are not alone in this whole journey. We do provide psychosocial support. So we do have online online support groups, of which there are volunteer befrienders that can share with you their journeys as well. And we've just launched an advanced metastatic breast cancer counseling support group that you can join online. We do have some of these programs because some of the side effects of chemotherapy is that you have numbness in your hands. And as such, what's happening is that we do have these activities that help in your recovery. And we are with ladies who are going through that same process. We do have training programs that are designed for the women as well as their caregivers. And of course, if you do have the side effect of you losing your hair as part of the chemotherapy side effects, we do have a wig loan program of which you're able to come and borrow wigs from us, and as well as to be eligible for that. And we also have a prosthetic bra service, okay, of which you are able to have this available at the public hospitals. Okay, so as such, that's what we do in a nutshell, in a pretty fast speed. But what I want you to know is that today we're talking about diet, and diet plays a major role in the breast cancer survivor's journey. Achieving and maintaining a healthy body weight is key. A recent publication on the 9th of June by the American Cancer Society Guidelines on Diet and Physical Activities has indicated that dietary patterns rich in plant foods and low in animal products and refined carbohydrates lower the risk of breast cancer. So today's webinar, we'll be hearing about what are the benefits of low carbohydrate and high fat diet has, and what are the benefits to breast cancer. We have two very special guests with us today. There's Yanti, who is a chef and a baker who's found a way to provide replacements in our diet so that people can still enjoy a sweet life without the worries of sugar harming their health. And we also will have Dr. Steve Tucker. Now, he is the founder and medical director of Tucker Medical Singapore. He is a medical oncologist and internist, and he is really into cancer prevention and treatment. And he's been offering nutritional and metabolic support for cancer patients in their families for over 25 years. He is a fellow of the Singapore Academy of Medicine and an American College of Physicians, and an officer of the chapter of Medical Oncologists Academy of Singapore. Now I'm going to let us welcome Yanti, who's going to share with us about the keto diet. Over to you, Yanti.
Hi. Gabriel? Gabriel?
Meet Yanti.
Hi, I'm Yanti, and I'm anti-sugar.
Yanti hates sugar so much that she refuses to eat it or put it in her cakes. Yes, Yanti found a way to make delicious, sweet, beautiful bakes without any sugar. Why?
Because sugar is really unhealthy, there are better options that give you the same sweetness.
And that's why she started Seriously Keto, a one-of-a-kind shop in Singapore that is both tasty and a healthier option. It contains zero added sugar, 100% gluten-free, very low carb, and there's so many you can choose from. It is based on the keto diet, and thousands of people in Singapore are adopting it every day.
People are waking up to the harm that sugar causes. That's why they come here instead.
This woman started an entire food business that puts health first. It may not have sugar, but it's as sweet as it gets.
Hi, that's me, Yanti, and I am a ketonian, and that is taking keto as my lifestyle. So there is restriction and there is a choice. Restriction is a diet. A choice is a lifestyle. So when I make the choice to live without sugar, I make a conscious decision to love myself and to be kind to myself. I am 55. That means this body is 55, which means all my organs inside me is 55. My liver, my kidney, my pancreas, they're all 55. While on the outside, I can still look 35 with makeup and all, but on the inside, it is 55. So, but being a ketonian, I help my organ be happier. I let it rest. I help it rejuvenate. I help it, giving it a chance to repair. And so at 55, I can look 55 and 35, but I feel 25 on the inside. All this can be done by not eating sugar. But of course, I still want to be a sociable person, living life, going out, having parties, having a coffee break. That's why I created Seriously Keto. So it's a support for a sweet life. So you can actually still living sweetly without the sugar. So let me show you what is considered to be a normal healthy diet, the so-called healthy versus a keto meal. Gabriel? Okay, say here, we can see that with this kind of a meal, if you can look into the chart, so you wake up with a orange juice, you wake up with a whole wheat bread and a soft boiled eggs, and then you have a snack of an apple, then you have your lunch, you have a coffee break, you have your dinner, and maybe 2 pieces of a durian. All this is 110 grams of carbs, and it is only 1,200 calories, which is actually very low for you, and you will actually still go hungry. Versus a keto meal, which gives you lemon juice, 2 eggs, a keto bun, and bacon, and you have your snacks, you have your lunch with a big chicken, and you have a coffee break with a chocolate cake, a cupcake. You have your dinner, and after dinner, you can still have your granita or gelato, whichever, but all this kind of food. So this is about food choices, and you can still eat all this within your limit of 20 grams of carbs, which gives you about 1,640 kilocalories. You will be very full. So I believe in educating yourself to achieve a goal. So if you make keto a religion, for the lack of a better word, I'm sorry. So when you believe in it, you want to live by it. Gabriel? So you will plan. You will have to plan. You cannot just go out and go have an oh moment. You have to plan, like as if you plan a date, you have to plan a meeting, an appointment. So you plan, so you don't go out unprepared. So for me, it's all in the mindset. It's like if you're having an allergy of peanuts or gluten, you will stay away from those things. So why don't you consider and tell yourself that you're allergic to sugar so that you'll just stay away from it. So I started making a sugarless dessert so I can have a better choice. So I can now have my dessert with my coffee break. I can even have breads for sandwiches and all, and for me to share with everyone. So my last checkup I had with Dr. Tucker, he said I'm very, very healthy. So I'm doing this because I believe in prevention. I am loving myself and I'm loving my family. To take care of a sick parent out of cancer or diabetic and all, it's very, very hard. It really puts a toll on the caregiver, like mentally, physically, emotionally. It's very, very tiring, as well as financially. So food can either nourish you or perish you. So what I eat now is my investment for my future when I am in my 70s and a grandma and trying to enjoy myself with my kids. So I am a ketonian. I'm a happy, healthy. I'm full of energy. I am focused. I sleep very well. I have no medical issues. And I want to shout it out to the world for everybody to know that eating well gives you a well life. So be consistent, be committed, and be knowledgeable. That's my message to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yanti, for sharing with us. And now let me welcome Dr. Stephen Tucker, who will be able to share with us the science behind the keto diet. Over to you, Dr. Tucker.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Yanti. Thank you, Seriously Keto and Breast Cancer Foundation. It's funny, both of you guys are mentioning keto, obviously, and we're very supportive of keto. But the topic today is diet. And so I'm going to sort of teach and spin on variations that will include keto. And I think it's you'll see it's very useful to talk about extremes, being a carnivore or being a vegan or fasting are extremes, and they'll illustrate why the keto diet can be helpful in cancer. With that, let me go ahead and get some slides up, start my timer. We're going to try to do this in 20 minutes. I'll go quickly, but it's recorded, so you can go back and look again. And I think I need to share a screen, and we get started. Here we go. Great. Does that look okay to everybody? Okay. So today we're going to talk about cancer treatment and prevention and how fasting and diets and actually sugar get involved. I'm going to tell you a good story, and then I'm going to give you some heartbreaking news. We're going to talk about the science of sugar, or science and sugar, some real studies that make the point, and then some positive things about what we do in the office. Briefly about me, I've always wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor to help people, and initially that meant cure, try to fix what's broken. But I literally got struck by lightning, an epiphany that made me rethink this more than 10, 12 years ago. And that in order to be a good cancer doctor, I didn't just want to treat disease. I realized we have to prevent. And everything that we've been doing in our practice and what I try to achieve is about preventing and incorporating lifestyle, as well as my own interests in genetics or technology. So first, a good story. Here's a story of a real patient in Singapore, 38-year-old premenopausal woman who a year and a half ago had a dry cough, short of breath, tummy pain, and went to A&E. Her background story, she never had a medical problem. She was never married, no kids. There's no family history of cancer. There was some diabetes in her family, but it didn't really stand out. So in the hospital, she was found to have a large tumor in her breast, and it was what we call HER2 positive. And the cancer had spread into the lungs. There was fluid in the lungs. It was in the lymph nodes. And here's a representative picture of the very large tumor that was in the breast. And of course, she was advised chemotherapy and targeted therapy. But at the same time, when she went to the hospital, she was found to have florid diabetes out of control that had been undiagnosed. This measurement, hemoglobin A1C, is the average blood sugar over the last 2 or 3 months, and a normal one should be around 5 or 5.3. So it's diabetes out of control. And she was given diabetes medicines, 3 different pills, and insulin to take. Well, she was referred to our practice, and we initially started with her chemotherapy. And here's the recipe above, the combination chemo given every 3 weeks. And so starting a year ago, August, she kept getting chemotherapy and steroids, and that was great. And fortunately, she went from something like this to something like this. And that giant bright white spot going away is representative of her complete remission. Now, at the very same time, we had to deal with the diabetes. And we don't believe in managing diabetes. We try to reverse diabetes. So here is her hemoglobin A1C, and you can see the glucose and the insulin and a measurement called the HOMA-IR, or metabolic assessment for insulin resistance, because insulin's the big villain in the story today. The next 20 minutes, all about insulin. All of these got better at the same time as she was getting her chemo because of the hard work of our team, her hard work, her family's hard work at reversing diabetes. So now the bad news, and I'll go quickly. Samantha touched on this, but we have lots of problems in the world aside from just COVID. We've got global diabetes pandemic, an obesity pandemic. We have heart attacks are the #1 killer globally, and cancer is the #2 killer globally. Obesity and overweight around the world are rampant. No country in the world has stopped or reversed obesity and overweight. In Singapore, 43% of Singapore is obese or overweight, and that number continues to go up. And everyone knows we have a war on diabetes, and that goes hand in hand with obesity. What you might not know is that obesity and cancer is a potent and deadly mix. that obesity is specifically associated with 13 kinds of cancer, which account for 40% of all cancers and a quarter of the cancers in men, and more than half of the cancers in women. It's associated with more than half of the female cancers. Globally, there's going to be 18 million new cases of cancer, 8.6 female cancers, 2.1 breast cancers, and globally 600,000 plus deaths. Of those deaths, when you say that obesity and cancer is a deadly mix, we're talking about excess deaths that are associated with the obesity, above and beyond, say, genetics or things we don't understand. And 31% of those excess deaths are breast cancer. So again, I said it's bad news. I'll go fast. Cancer is the #1 cause of death in Singapore. It happens all day long. Breast cancer in Singapore, the pink line, continues to increase faster than anything else. Now, I'm not just here to give you bad news. There's a reason I'm laying it out like this. So breast cancer, again, continues to increase every 5 years across Singapore, according to the Cancer Registry. And those numbers also increase when you break it down by age group, so that women who are older have even 3 and 4 times more the risk. Now, why did I show you that? We're going to come back to that after I teach you a little science. So, science and sugar. I like to call this a very brief history of cancer. Cancer has been around for 4,000 years, at least. The mummies and pharaohs, you can find this, archaeologists can see it in the bones and in the skeletons. It was in ancient Egypt. Fast forward, there's a guy named Percival Potts. He's a doctor in London, 1779. He says that little boys who are chimney sweeps and get soot all over their face, they get cancer. He calls it a carcinogen. And so that's the carcinogenic theory of cancer. Louis Pasteur comes along 100-odd years later, and he says this is an infectious theory for germ theory in general, not cancer, but one of his disciples, someone named Rouse, a doctor in New York, starts discovering that viruses cause cancer. And in my imagination, I'm imagining these guys arguing about what's the cause of cancer. Is it carcinogens? Is it infections? Is it something we don't know? Then comes along this fellow, Dr. Warburg. Dr. Warburg's really important because he's a biochemist who studies energy inside cells. And Warburg says, you guys are all wrong. As an aside, everybody knew Warburg was very, very arrogant. He said he was friends with Einstein and no one else. He thought no one was smart. So I imagine him saying, you guys are all fools. I know the cause. And to Warburg, that was the energy metabolism in the cells. But honestly, he was so arrogant that when DNA was discovered, everybody forgot about Warburg's ideas. So let me show you Warburg's idea. But before that, let me overlay this graph. This is global sugar consumption over the last 200 or 300 years. You can easily see World War I and World War II, but the amount of sugar per person is exponential, growing wildly. So what did Warburg actually talk about? Warburg saw in his cells in the laboratory something called the Warburg effect. It's an observation that says even when oxygen is around, cancer cells are going to make energy from this thing called glycolysis. It's just a way of making energy, rather than the other way, which is the long word here of oxidative phosphorylation, which is what all the healthy cells do. And the difference is, I'll show you here. Here's a normal cell. And when you have oxygen and you do this fancy thing called oxphos or oxidative phosphorylation, you get a lot of energy. That's good for cells. And even without oxygen, you can make a little bit of energy. And that's like lactate threshold, running hard and hitting the wall. Cells can go back and forth. They could do either when they're healthy. What Warburg said was that cancer cells, they always favor the glycolysis. They only can make energy by burning sugar into something called pyruvate and lactate. It's the equivalent of the healthy cells using solar and the cancer cells burning coal. And cancer cells are limited by this observation that Warburg saw. Now, Warburg saw that, and then he had an idea, his hypothesis. He says cancer, above all other diseases, has many secondary causes. Could be genetics, could be carcinogens, it could be infections. But there's only one real cause, and that was the disruption of energy metabolism in the cell. The idea that you were burning coal, and if you had an Achilles heel of genetics or a carcinogen, the two together were dangerous. That's called the Warburg hypothesis. And it's actually shown to most cancer patients in the form of a PET CT scan, because the Warburg hypothesis is what allows the dye to get in the cancer cells, but not in the healthy cells. And some people argue, of course, isn't it genetic? Isn't it genetic? Well, we love genetics, and genetics are great for personalizing your risk or personalizing your treatment. But the fact is, if you look at a population like Asia, like Koreans or Japanese, where there is a consistent, identical genetic background, what these bar graphs show is that breast cancer keeps going up and up. So it's not really genetics. The women, Asian women, have had the same genetics for hundreds of years. And that's explains the rapid increase in the number of new cases, or at least most of it, certainly not all of it. So that's first 10 minutes. I've got about 10 minutes more. Let's see what we can get done. How do we tie all this together and then bring it back to diet? This is called the metabolic theory of cancer. And I give this slide and I present it without a slide, just visually every day of the week. I see obesity and diabetes in the middle of the slide, okay? And why do we care? Is this an issue? Are people dying directly of obesity? No, they die of consequences of obesity. But how does one get extra fat cells? Doctors, authors have a million ways, crackpot ideas on how to lose weight, but there's only one way to gain fat, and that is through the hormone insulin. It's in every medical physiology book. Insulin drives fat. You can't do that. You can't make fat without insulin. So ask yourself, hey, where does the extra insulin in my body come from? Why did that happen? Because your blood glucose went up. Really? Well, why did my blood glucose go up? I'll tell you why. Because you've been eating carbs and processed sugar. That's why. Of course, your sleep schedule is important, your exercise is important, and that can change your insulin around, but overwhelmingly, it's about what you're eating. If what you eat makes your glucose go up and then your insulin goes up, you're going to make fat. And that's called insulin resistance and diabetes. And the consequence is excess heart attacks, Alzheimer's, cancer, fatty liver, 80% of the world's non-communicable diseases. The metabolic theory of disease, not just cancer. Okay, now that was the science lesson. Let's see how we put that into practice. And like I said, I'm not actually going to go into keto at the moment. Let's talk about the extreme. If you want to be on a low carb diet, how about you just don't eat? What if you fast for 1 day, 3 days, or a week? So let's talk about fasting, because fasting lowers sugar. The keto diet is a low sugar diet. So let's just see what we can learn from that. We'll go back to Warburg cells and fasting. So we've got the healthy cells in blue and the cancer cells in black, and they respond differently to stress. Okay, stress could be fasting. If I told you you're not going to get to eat all weekend, you would eat more on Friday. You got the message this was going to happen. Cancer cells, when they get the message about fasting, ignore it. They need to be fed 24/7, where healthy cells say, we better slow down. So normal cells, normal growth rates, adaptability. Cancer cells, no adaptability. Hit them with fasting for 24, 48 hours, and what happens? Healthy cells, they adapt. They go into a maintenance mode. They hibernate. They're protected. Cancer cells, zoom, zoom, zoom. They keep going. Then we give chemotherapy. Think about that. What if I give chemo while you're fasting? You know what actually happens? The healthy cells, because they're sleeping, get less side effect. And the cancer cells, because they're zoom, 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 and they're already disrupted because of the fasting, and I hit them with chemo, you get a more beneficial effect. And so we're going to talk about fasting, but think about it as a variation on keto or low carb. Okay, so there's lots of different kinds of fasting. You can do short-term fasting, water fast. You could reduce your calories. You can do a 5-7. You can do it every week, every 2 weeks. There's a fasting mimicking diet. We like this because you're not really fasting. It mimics fasting. And we give you about 1,200 calories a day for 1 day, and then 500, something like that. And then some people do longer fast, but at a different cycle. This slide, I'm going to skip it because we've got 5 to 7 minutes. Fasting makes chemotherapy less toxic. This is an article from one of my colleagues 5 years ago, early reports, short-term fasting. Current updated article, significant reduction in major side effects. And that last green little line, lowering of insulin growth factor. Insulin growth factor drives cancer, and so lowering it by fasting helps. Okay, lots of articles in my world about fasting, but I'm going to show you one. That one article is called The Fasting Mimicking Diet in these women, a randomized study. This is what doctors always want. Show me where we helped patients. This is 130 women with breast cancer, stages 2 and 3, and they were randomized to either fasting or no fasting, and they all were getting chemo before surgery to try to shrink the tumor in the breast. So what happened? They used the fasting mimicking diet. They, got low calories day 1, chemo's given on day 4, straightforward here. What happened? In the shaded box, 43 of the patients hated it. They wouldn't do it. I will tell you, in our office, everyone does it. It takes a team approach, education, and more than anything, it takes time and communication. But they had trouble getting people to do it. However, the ones who did it were 4 times more likely to have their tumor completely disappear, what we call a pathologic complete response, okay? And they got rid of the steroids, which also make the glucose and insulin go up. So at the other extreme, another study, similar style, 135 patients, what they showed was the opposite. If you can't control your diet, if you have diabetes out of control, you never get your tumor to disappear when you get chemo before surgery. 0 responses. And the last bit on fasting that's really a great gem to take home is that overnight fasting consistently shows a benefit in the reducing the risk of cancer coming back, breast cancer specifically. In this study, 2,400 women over the age of 50, people who fasted less than 13 hours had a 36% more likely to have their cancer come back than the women who fasted more than 13 hours. We generally say a 14-hour overnight fast is the way to go. Prolonging it is a simple drug-free way, your overnight fast. You can still have 3 meals a day, low carb, vegan, carnivore, whatever diet you want. Just give your stomach a rest. All right, what's our experience? So I think I have about 7 minutes. Let's see how fast I can go. We offer, as my team always reminds me, culturally appropriate, personalized nutrition plans. Sure, I love keto, low carb, and carnivore, and 1 meal a day and fasting, but we have to get a program that you can stick to, whether it's low carb, keto, fasting. We also spend a lot of time talking about sleep, bad sleep, high stress, high insulin, weightlifting, bodybuilding, exercise, more muscles, less glucose, lower insulin. Good community, social skills, people to support you, less stress, less glucose, less insulin, and absolutely cut back on alcohol. But what we love is technology. This is a continuous glucose meter. And with that, I can tell what you've been eating. It creates full transparency. There's no such thing as a healthy diet. What's true is this food healthy for my dietary goal? And the continuous glucose meter tells us how to get there. We've all used it in the office. Every nurse, every admin, everyone here knows about this. Here's an example. Here are oats, steel cut granola, organic, antibiotic free. This is pure food, no sugar added. And on the glucose meter, it's one of the largest single blood sugar spikes I've ever seen in a non-diabetic. That's a huge spike. Here's a double spike seen on one of the glucose meters, and that was from a bowl of cherries, okay? And here's a donut, okay? And here's fasting. That little yellow apple on the far right, or at least on my side, that's the meal. That's a low carb meal, not affecting the person who had been fasting all day long. We have taken all of the studies and made our own fasting protocols and are working now on publishing our own approach to fasting across Asia. This is what we call a fasting planner. So once we know when you're going to have your chemo, Do we want to do a 24-hour or a 12-hour fast with 24 after, or 48 hours? Is your chemo every 7 days, every 21 days? You get the point. Let's go back to that first patient. This was her diabetic reversal. She's doing great. Here's her glucose meter from day one with breast cancer. Blood sugar's high, lots of spikes, really big ups and downs. Maybe they're getting in the green range, fewer spikes. We finally discovered that just being incredibly sensitive to one piece of toast in the morning was driving so much of this person's blood sugar. And once that's gone, now, and really what that time shows is how long it might take to extinguish, get rid of the addiction to bread or carbs. And right now, she is pretty much diabetes free. So I actually think I am at nearly the last slide. We didn't hit keto head on, but we're going to do it in the Q&A. This is an article from a few months ago in Harvard Public Health Journal, fall of 2019. And I love this. At the bottom in the black, this was the cover article. The cancer miracle isn't a cure, it's prevention. And what the author says is you cannot treat your way out of this epidemic of cancer. The only solution is going to be prevention. And so I started this approach in women at the highest risk for breast cancer, those who've already survived stage 1, 2, 3. And then we spread it to their sisters, their mothers, their aunties, their family. And it created a holistic loop of care, of oncology care, secondary prevention, and then primary care and prevention in the most at-risk people. And at the same time, we're reducing diabetes, obesity, and heart disease along the way. I'm just one guy with a loud voice and likes to talk to people, but all of this gets done by a team of people. I cannot do this alone in any way. Our patients are from all over the world, and they're the biggest contributors to our success with the trust and the communication they share with us. And this team of nurses, doctors, nutritionists, therapists, because you really have to get a behavioral change, all of us working together to help our patients and do a prevention program. So that's my last slide. I probably did 25 minutes, right guys? Not terrible. Let me stop sharing here. All good. Back to you, Sam.
Okay, thank you so much for the informative talk, and also for the fact that there's so many things that we can learn about how we should do prevention rather than the cure. Now we've got so many questions that we have to actually choose, all right? So for the first question that, many of you had submitted your questions earlier, and so we'll try to answer as many as we can, but our time is limited. So the first question that one of the members asked was, keto diet consists of high fat. For ER positive breast cancer, it's a well-known fact that fat is one of the attributes to the growing of this cancer. So how does keto diet prevent it? So Dr. Tucker, perhaps you can answer that.
The question is mixing two different things. What the question as posed is saying that isn't hormone sensitive, estrogen positive breast cancer associated with obesity, with being fat, which is very different than being on the keto diet, which is a well-formulated, medically prescribed diet for over 100 years that consists of low carb, about 5% carbs, 20% protein, and 75% of your calories on a daily basis from fat. And the reason that that high fat or relatively high fat diet works at fighting cancer and chronic disease is it forces the body to burn fat. The obese person needs to burn fat. Our bodies always make glucose. We don't need to eat glucose. We don't need to eat carbs. And if you don't believe me, just look at lions and tigers. They don't eat carbs, right? You could live just fine eating salmon, fish, chicken, and salads, which are very, very low carb, the rest of your life. So the question here is the keto diet is high fat because it helps you burn your existing fat and get rid of your body's addiction to burning sugar. Eat sugar, burn sugar, eat sugar, burn sugar. You can only break that cycle when you start eating fat and teach your body to be a fat burning machine. And then you reduce your risk because you'll drop your weight and get rid of the diabetes.
Okay, thank you so much for that. We have another question here, and perhaps Yanti will answer this. It's really, there is a question on if you're on a keto diet versus a plant-based diet. Is that possible, Yanti?
To be on keto, I mean, you be a vegan keto, you mean?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it is quite possible. It's quite cumbersome because of the proteins that's quite limited when you are a vegan. And eggs is actually one of our keto food. So, but it is still possible. And I actually have this book that I read called by Liz McDowell. She is a vegan keto, so you can look it up, but it is possible.
It being even vegetarian or vegan keto is completely possible. It's very difficult. For example, when you're eating beans, when you're eating, lentils, you're getting slow carbs. You get protein and carb together. So it's possible, but to hit the macros of a keto diet, it's challenging. And another great resource is called the Charlie Foundation, which uses the keto diet for childhood epilepsy. And they have a whole section on vegetarian ketogenic diets as well. But it's absolutely possible.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question here. Is the keto diet a balanced diet? I mean, I thought our brain needs carbohydrates, and can an underweight person go on a keto diet? I think Dr. Steve Tucker, you have to answer this one.
So I don't know what a balanced diet is anymore. Is a balanced diet Subway and McDonald's twice a week? I don't, like I said, I don't know what a healthy diet is. The diet that you do that helps you make sure you're not obese, overweight, diabetic, or pre-diabetic is the right diet for you. That's the first thing. So balance, it's not a balanced diet, it's a balanced life, and it's reducing your risk of chronic disease. The second thing is, yeah, your brain loves glucose. Your brain loves carbohydrates. But the thing is, it doesn't need extra carbohydrates. I'll go back to my lions and tigers. We make sugar, we make glucose from protein in our body. It's called gluconeogenesis. Glucose, sugar, new, genesis, like the Bible. We can make new sugar. We don't need to eat sugar for our brains. The brain is demanding and always wants glucose, but as long as you're eating protein and fat, you will always run a normal, healthy glucose level. We don't go to zero when we're eating protein and fat, and we don't need to eat sugar or processed carbohydrates. Was there another part in there? Can an underweight person?
Yes.
So we're really big fans. You can tell with the glucose meters, we don't judge the book by its cover. We like to get a body composition to know how much protein and fat is in a person's body so we can, help them define what their goals are. If you are a body mass index under 18, if you are medically underweight, you should be on a diet that helps you achieve a normal weight and maintain that weight. If you are have metastatic cancer, we need to know how much lean muscle mass you have and make sure the diet is formulated so that you're not destroying your body, that you're not burning the protein, and you have to meet the needs. But generally, the keto diet or a low carb diet, any diet that gets rid of processed sugars and insulin, is going to help you achieve what your proper set point should be.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, this is another question, and this is how is the keto diet able to support the chemotherapy process?
So, like I was talking about with the fasting, it could be keto or it could be low carb. So the real villain in the story is the part about eating sugars and carbs, blood glucose goes up, followed by insulin. So keto is a low carb diet. You can just be low carb and you don't have to do high fat. A lot of people don't like high fat. I feel better on more like 40% fat as opposed to a strict keto at 75% fat. How does all of that help the chemo process? Well, like we said in how some cells adapt and cancer cells don't, when you fast for 12, 24, 48 hours in advance, and it doesn't have to be a strict fast. You can certainly have water and clear liquids. You can have unsweetened tea, but you don't want to have carbohydrates. You could have some bone broth or collagen, things like that, because you don't want to eat foods that are going to spike your glucose and insulin. So you do that for 12, 24, 48 before, you get your chemotherapy, and invariably, all of our patients have less side effects by doing that. We also want you to continue that fast for 12 to 24 hours after, because that's really when the chemo is doing its business. So it's a sort of a pre-chemo fast to set the right stage. Then you do the chemo, the double whammy, the fasting chemo together. And then you have to wait 12 to 24 hours to make sure the chemo is washed out of your body and done its good job. That's how it really helps. It helps kill tumors, and it reduces side effect.
Okay, that's very exciting news to know. Now, this is a question for Yanti. It's expensive to go keto or eat healthier food choice. What meal preparation can one prepare, and how many cheat days are we allowed?
Oh my gosh, yes, cheat days is very popular questions. So when you talk about expensive, for me here, it's not necessarily expensive. Of course, keto is a higher in protein. So people always think that protein is more expensive than carbs, which is true. But when you are on keto, or a low carb diet, you actually don't eat as often. You don't get hungry that often. So by not being hungry that often, you eat less. And with the intermittent fasting, you eat even lesser. And because you are on a low carb, you are actually moderately, actually quite healthy. So you're financially better because you don't have to pay medical bills. So you can't compare a day kind of a meal a day's price. But if you take it in the long run for like a year or 2 years comparison, you actually save more. So it is not expensive at all. And meal prep, I actually like to buy things on a bulk. So when you have a deal, buy it in a larger amount. That would actually get your less expensive items. And for meal prep, I only bring a keto bun in my bag every day so that I'm ready. And cheat days, yes, the popular questions. I don't do cheat days, I said, but I do a date day. So I plan a date to go out, and when I do my dates, I eat anything, but still be a little bit more wary, and I do intermittent fasting before and after my date. Back to you, Sam.
Sam, part of that is really preparation, because it's easy to buy inexpensive food on the go, but it's all processed carbohydrates. And the challenge is for a lot of people to think in advance and do the shopping and the cooking, but increasingly there are meal services that can deliver low carb meals around Singapore and Asia. And I think the big food players are getting the message also, where they were selling us, big boxes of carbs. Increasingly, there's a growing market for lower carb products and more protein, more balanced products, reflecting. Though, if you just do a Google search of keto and see how rapidly it's been increasing, the marketeers are following, behind that, the frequency of the keto search. So it'll get cheaper and cheaper too.
Well, thank you so much. Now, Dr. Tucker, there's another question here. Are there any diet recommendations for estrogen positive breast cancer patients? And can ER positive patients have tofu?
Yes, they can. So it was a controversy for many years in the breast cancer literature about the plant-based estrogens, or what they call phytoestrogens, that were in tofu and a variety of other plant-based products. And multiple studies now, what are called meta-analysis or reviews of reviews, have made it clear that you can eat tofu, you can eat soy. If you, even large amounts should not be any problem for patients with hormone positive or hormone negative breast cancer, and shouldn't be an issue for the risk of getting breast cancer. The biggest risk in terms of what do you recommend, how do you manage risk? The recommendations should be to make sure you're at an ideal body weight, lose body fat, and make sure that your insulin and glucose levels are as low as possible without creating its own individual stress on yourself, mentally or financially, any other way. But everything we've said, that ER positive, ER negative, it's the same recommendation about achieving good metabolic health.
Okay, thank you. Yanti, I have a question for you. How do I know how much of fats and protein is enough for my daily intake?
Usually you have to go to a nutritionist to get better, but then there is actually a lot of apps out there on your Apple apps or Android apps. Yes. Just take myself, for instance. I'm 55, I'm 58 kilograms, and I'm doing maintenance now. I'm not trying to lose weight. I'm just trying to be me. And so I'm eating about 1,500 calories a day. So I'm taking 20 grams of carbs, 70 grams of protein, and about 120 grams of fat or less on the days that I don't feel like having my fat. So yeah, that's what it is. But there is an app that you can go to, which is easy. But if you can find a nutritionist, that's even better.
Okay.
Exactly.
Dr. Steve Tucker, another question for you. How does a keto diet benefit a cancer patient who is also a diabetic?
So a lot of people use keto and low carb to reverse diabetes. And there is this increasing trend, as I mentioned, not to manage certain chronic diseases, but to actually help people by integrating lifestyle and medicine to reverse the disease or rely less on medications. Diabetes, fundamentally, adult diabetes, not children with pancreas failure, not type 1s, but all of the type 2 diabetics are an example of excess glucose and excess insulin. And so adult diabetics, like the analogy Yanti was using, sort of, I think, around allergies, if you were gluten intolerant, that if you eat gluten and celiac and you got your tummy swells and get lots of pain in your belly, and somebody said, you shouldn't eat that, and you would, from yourself, when you eat it, you feel sick. Would you take a shot every day so that you could eat gluten? Or would you just say, I'm not going to eat gluten anymore? Because an adult diabetic is carbohydrate intolerant. And so getting rid of the carbs gets rid of the diabetes. It's the insulin is driving disease, and it's only there because of the carbs. So the way that the keto diet benefits a diabetic is the same way that it benefits a diabetic with cancer. In this case, and maybe this was an early question submitted before the talk, I know, and they probably didn't expect that we had a diabetic cancer patient and we fixed two problems, for the price of one. But that really illustrates the story.
Okay, so there's another one. I mean, for you, Dr. Tucker, can a cancer patient eat red meat?
Yes, but they don't have to. That's the key. This comes up a lot. Everyone thinks that the keto diet is some kind of caveman diet where you have to eat half a side of beef. Actually, the keto diet done properly is a lot of fat, and it's only 20% of your calories coming from protein. And nobody said that it had to be red meat. The key things to keep in mind, if you're worried about red meat, you should be worried about processed food. And I would throw in, it's for another day, another topic, but in my community, this is incredibly important. It just as important as avoiding carbs should be to avoid seed oils. So processed oils, which are corn oil, soy oil, linseed, flaxseed, most seed oils are highly, highly, highly manufactured. The oils that, now, without getting into the whole chemistry of cooking oils, here's what people should do. Use olive oil, use avocado oil, and use high quality coconut oil. Those are three very safe oils for the keto diet. Now, on another day, we can also talk about with our cardiology friends and heart disease and what they think of the keto diet. But at the end of the day, heart disease is driven by insulin. LDL cholesterol is certainly a suspect, and we respect the importance of keeping an eye on it. But at the end of the day, if you reverse diabetes and obesity, you lower the risk of heart disease. So, but red meat, eat all you want, but avoid processed foods. But you don't need to eat red meat. You could just as well eat wild or farm salmon.
Okay. Yanti, there's a question for you. If sugar from fructose is bad, what substitutes can we consider?
Since I have a bakery, I actually use a lot of erythritol and monk fruit because they actually has no aftertaste, which is also good. And to be tested, I actually put a glucose meter on myself. And when I eat those sugars, I don't get a spike in my insulin. So, but of course, if you eat too much of everything, you will always get, a bad side effect. Anything, too much meat, you'll be bad, too bad. Too much sugar, too much substitute sugars is also bad. But erythritol is a plant-based and monk fruit as well. So I'm pretty safe with that. Dr. Tucker, can you add?
Well, there's a lot of sugar substitutes. I like the ones that you use. You have to be cautious on the amounts of those alcohol-based sugars. One of your treats tastes great, but if I eat a bag of sugar-free caramels with erythritol, I will get serious bloating and discomfort. But the monk fruit's no problem. And stevia is no problem. It's just be cautious with alcohol sugars in total amounts. But otherwise, there are no issues.
Yeah, you're not supposed to eat overly much as well. So
that's
a cupcake is good, but don't eat 12 cupcakes.
Because part of the whole problem is the addiction. It's the sugar addiction or the hyper processed food addiction. So the idea of some people can have a drink a week. Some people abstain for a year and then they have one drink and they're back to being an alcoholic. Some people are addicted to sugar in the same way, so that even eating a sweet sugar-free item keeps the craving going and puts them at risk. So that's the dark side of sugary treats, of sweet treats.
It is. Sugar is an addiction. So you just have to be aware of it. And to me,
acceptance.
When I do make my own baked food as an bake, I got my sugar fix, and that's about it. I don't go for more and more and finish a bag like 12 cupcakes.
Okay, so now since we're on the topic of sugar, Dr. Steve Tucker, I have one question here from a lady. She says, does high sugar intake feed cancer cells, thus making the cancer grow more aggressively? Because after my chemo, I have really very bad nausea and dizziness, and the only food I can tolerate is sweet stuff like chocolate and ice cream.
So there's a lot to unpack in that question. Sugar feeds cancer, so we know that. And keep in mind, when you say sugar, we're talking about sucrose. So if you're having added sugar, you're having sucrose. Now, what floats in our blood is glucose, and what comes in fruit is fructose. But sucrose is the marriage of glucose and fructose together. So you get both pieces when you have added sugar. The second piece, and both of those, the fructose causes fatty liver, and you don't need the excess glucose because your body can make it. Now, when you're doing chemotherapy, all of your taste buds change. All of your, yeah, and if you're doing chemotherapy, you're experiencing the single most stressful time of your life, right? There's nothing more stressful than that. Probably nothing more stressful. And then you want, somebody like me comes along and says, let me change your diet, right? So you have to have time and place. But cravings, we see patients like the person with the question every day, and we give them options and opportunities. We certainly don't scold them for eating sugar. We make sure that you're aware of what all the different things you could do post chemotherapy, and do you really need to eat? And so that fasting helps with that. And when you know the benefits of our protocols and have the knowledge of why sugar is so harmful in cancer, you're more likely to stick with it. So I think, I'll leave that question with that, but it's, everyone's different and taste buds change. And sometimes it's a lot easier to get people to make dietary changes after chemo when the dust is sort of settled and the shock of the diagnosis starts to sink in.
Okay, thank you very much. We're actually at 11:30. We've tried to answer as many questions as possible. Unfortunately, we couldn't, but there was one question from the audience that maybe Dr. Tucker, you can help answer. The question here is, lots of breast cancer patients who are going through chemo lose their appetite and their weight. If they go on fasting, how can they sustain their weight and strength? What's the diet that the patients should really have to enable them to go through chemo successfully and help them to recover fully?
So the first part of it, to answer that question effectively, I would split the patients. Just because you're getting chemo, you need to know who we're dealing with. If you're stage 1, 2, 3 breast cancer, you're getting chemotherapy as an insurance plan, as an adjuvant, as an extra to reduce your risk of cancer coming back. If I say reduce the risk of coming back, that means you're actually probably already cured. That a lot of people getting chemo are already cured, and we're just trying to improve those percentages who may not be cured. And those are healthy adults who, if they're overweight or obese or diabetic, pre-diabetic, they need to lose weight. I mean, chemo's a weird way to do it, but actually most people gain weight on chemo. Despite that, because of like the other question, people are eating the wrong things and haven't been given good advice. So in the adjuvant setting, stage 1, 2, 3, most people need to lose weight anyway. And losing your appetite is okay. And we need to help you with fasting and any kind of low carb diet that you're willing to proceed with in baby steps. Whatever works, we'll meet you, not just halfway, we'll meet you where you are. Now, if it's stage 4, if it's metastatic cancer, I need to know if you're what we call catabolic. Are you in a state where the cancer is stealing all of your energy from protein, from muscle that you can't see? And in that case, we get a body composition. And if there is adequate protein, then we think that, we have to formulate a low carb or keto diet to make sure that you get adequate protein and fat to really suppress that fire of cachexia, loss of appetite, and that self-destruction of catabolic. Synthetic is growing and catabolic is destructive. So it's the same diets for all of these patients, but you need to know the starting point. And that helps them recover and go on to live very, long and fruitful, happy lives. Did I get everything, all the parts of that question, Sam? It wasn't in our pre-questions.
Yes, I think you answered most of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much for staying with us. We've got over 100 of us online, and we'd like to thank Yanti Prasali from Keto Diet, as well as from Dr. Stephen Tucker, who is coming from the Tucker Medical Center. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any more questions, send it to us at inquiries@bcf.org.com, org.sg, and we will look forward to answering your questions. And as such, we'd like to thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, BCF. Thank you, Seriously
Thank you.
Keto. Bye.
Thanks, Dr. Tucker. Thanks, Sam. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.